this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin. Redefining the sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. Taking the long view of history, I think we can go back to maybe the Sumerians, when we begin to consider written communication. That is, putting down in symbols how we're going to relay information, maybe to one another, or maybe as leaving behind a record that we even ever existed. And that's a very analog way to look at it. And what I mean by that is that, our forebears, press things into clay, symbols. Then there was the eventual stroke of a pen. And you have to find a place to put these things on, some kind of medium. Like papyrus, for instance. Of course, we're moving away from that now. We're no longer kind of, handcuffed to it. But, there's part of the elegance of it that I miss, of writing. There's something about that communication between your brain, your eyes, and the tips of your fingers as you form those letters. Today, I want to talk about something that involves creating a communication, a written communication that's very, very specific. A written communication that involves a husband and a wife that was buried alive. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Dave, we're going to hop in the Wayback Machine real quick.
Yeah, we got to go back a little, not in the way back machine, but a little bit. 2017, May. David Pagniano and his wife, Sandra, are in the middle of what has been described as a nasty divorce. Now, they are still living together. Sandra's 39, David is 62, and they have two daughters that are aged 8 and 12 at the time this is all happening. According to David Pagniano, while he and the girls were asleep, Sandra packed her stuff and left. And David, doesn't report her missing. He doesn't do anything. He just moves on with his life. But one of Sandra's best friends is like, she wouldn't leave. She would not just leave. She was really involved in the girls' lives. She wouldn't just leave. She was in the middle of a nasty divorce, fighting for custody of the girls. She wouldn't just walk away. So her friend is the one that calls police to report Sandra Pagniano missing. And police show up to talk to David, find out what's going on. And he answers the door and says, "Here, I have 2 handwritten notes by Sandra. Here's one she wrote to the girls." Basically, the letter to the girls just says that she has to leave. The letter that Sandra supposedly wrote to David, she gives him everything, custody, everything. Whatever they were fighting over, she just walks away. "Here, David, you take everything, including our daughters." Now, police look at this and go, yeah, this isn't making any sense. And according to the lead investigator in the case, Sergeant Jack Maddox, he said the handwriting analysis showed the notes were in fact written by David Pagniano. So he becomes a person of interest, and that allows them to start getting information. One of the biggest things investigators were able to get, cell phone records of David Pagniano. So that's where we are in May of 2017, and it comes down to handwritten notes that David Pagniano claims his wife has written for them, and police saying, "No, she didn't. You did."
You have to think about, who are you engaged with in your life that there's going to be the highest probability that they're going to have something in for you. They're going to have a motive to make you disappear, so that they can, in fact, retain all that remains of you, after you're gone. Those things that maybe they believe that they're owed, And sometimes I think that extends out to your life as well. I think that we see that played out. People view other people as possessions many times. They dehumanize them to that point. And, you stack all of that together, and then you look at the pain of the divorce. I actually heard somebody say at one point in time, and, I've been through a divorce many, many years ago. And I think it was a therapist at one point in time said that a divorce many times is even more painful than experiencing a death in your family. Because with death, it's kind of like a solid marker in time, and you have those memories and everything, but you continue to live. And then, in the wake of a divorce, particularly if there's kids involved and that sort of thing, it's a pain that is relived over and over and over again. And so it really takes a toll. I don't know if you've got two people that have attempted to create a life, there's a lot to lose there, Dave. There's a lot to be gained, I think, maybe through the eyes of somebody that doesn't necessarily have your best interest at heart.
You know this. I know it too, having gone through a divorce. At certain points in time, you're willing to fight for everything. You're really I'm not giving up anything because I'm so frustrated and mad over the whole thing. But then after a while, you get worn down. You're like, I don't care. I don't care.
I just want to, Where do I sign?
They were not at this point. And it's the two letters. That's why, you mentioned the letters. They're the two letters left behind. They are the two biggest clues that I'm reminded of Jon Benet Ramsay and the ransom note.
Yep.
I never trust a note that is written at the house.
No.
I never trust that note, because if somebody is going to do harm, they're going to bring the note with them. They're not going to sit down and write it out while they're trying to escape the house. In this particular case, do you really think a mother of two girls who has been fighting for their very survival as a family unit, mom and the two girls, that she's going to leave two notes that leave everything to her husband? No.
What are the odds of that a mama would walk away and, I would be more inclined to say, I could see you pulling up stakes and running out the door with everything that you could pack into the back of your car and not say a word. I'm buying that before I'm buying taking the time to write something out like this, because if you're doing that, you're having to think about this to the point where she's pushed to the point where she's having to think about abandoning her babies, and she's admitting to it. And I'm going to leave you everything. But that's the thing about it though, Dave. One never really knows what's hiding just beneath the surface, or who is hiding just beneath the surface.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
I can look at my mother's handwriting and my mother-in-law's handwriting, and they're both kind of in the same age range. And it's amazing that people that grew up in that time period, the born in, I don't know, roughly the 40s, and they came up through the 50s. And particularly as it applies to females back during that time, I've seen this happen before as well with handwriting. It looks the same. There's something about it. There's an elegance to it. I think that people took their time when they were writing. But my mother and my mother-in-law's handwriting, it's almost, I'll have to show you an image of it sometimes, Dave. The notes, they look almost identical, to a passerby that would see these two women's writings, examples of them, or exemplars, as they're referred to in handwriting analysis, just a casual person would say, wow, that's written by the same person. But in investigations, Dave, there's a group of people that we turn to when we have these questions about handwriting, and they're able to just really pick out that fine little detail that you and I might not normally think about, that is a specific identifier.
It's so funny because you mentioned that, and having covered a number of stories and having to bring in handwriting experts to explain how they came to the conclusions that they did. It seems to me, Joe, that if I were to study the way you write, and I'm sitting there with an example of your
Lord
writing,
have mercy on your soul, because my writing
mine is horrible too. But then I could
it's
copy
horrible,
it.
dude.
But you would think I can copy this, and you would notice each letter has a specific thing. But what handwriting experts do is they can tell where you actually put the weight on the utensil you're writing with, whether it's pen or pencil. They can tell whether or not you were lifting up or pushing down. They can tell by the size of the loop or the shape of the loop or the curl at the end. And it's interesting how they break it down, because you and I will see something and go, it's the same thing, or it's very, very similar. And they actually break it down and go, actually, no, let me show you why. And once they do, you can't unsee it. You're like, oh my gosh. And
it's like looking at one of those 3D pictures, where you try to make sense out of it. But, one of the things, and let me just kind of give everybody a real brief primer here, because it's kind of fascinating when, in this particular case, where we've got two examples or exemplars of these writings, one dealing with the kids, one dealing with the husband.
And actually addressed to them. One was addressed to the girls, and the other was addressed to the husband. You're
looking at these things, and so if there's two terms that people will apply to folks that examine handwriting. First is FDE, which is a forensic document examiner. Okay. And there's another term that's used that's forensic handwriting analyst.
And these are different?
No, they're really not. They've got a couple of different certifications you can go through, and it's one of these jobs in forensics where you have to do an extensive apprenticeship. People think apprenticeships don't exist anymore. In forensics, they do handwriting, ballistics, fingerprint. You don't just go out and say, I'm going to be a handwriting. No, it doesn't. I don't care if you've got a master's degree in forensic science and you want to do handwriting, you're going to have to sit at the feet of a master. I had a friend, a very dear friend of mine, that she did an apprenticeship, Dave, that lasted for 3 years before they cut her loose.
Good
and it
grief.
is, you have to be committed to it. So some of the things they're looking for are going to be speed, which, if you're writing in cursive, is the speed at which you write a document or make out a document. And that goes to kind of the smoothness that you're writing with. They're going to look at pressure, like how much pressure. I mean, just think about it. If you're trying to copy something and you're looking over at a document and then looking down at the document you're creating and you're trying to duplicate that in some way, you're being very careful. So that means you're applying more pressure. And then they're going to have ending locations and beginning locations. And you don't think about this. Like if you sign your name, you just do it. You don't really think about how it's done. So if somebody tries to replicate your signature, it's going to seem very forced, purposed, and it's not going to have that smoothness to it that, like if you're just signing a check, not that many people sign checks anymore, or, you're handing over something, an official document where you sign it. Those are all some of the considerations they have. And here's another interesting thing, positionality. And here's, people might remember this. You ever walk into a bank lobby And they've got those big standing desks, with the pins that are attached to the chains, and you've got to fill out a deposit slip and all of that. Well, do you realize how many bank robbery notes have been written at those kind of tables?
Really?
And they, over the years, a tremendous number of them. So the position that because you write, your writing will slightly appear different as from standing as opposed to sitting, because you're supported. And there's this muscular, skeletal, neurological connection between all of this. It's so detailed in what these people do. But if somebody tries to mask writing in some way, and there's a couple ways you can do it, it's going to stand out to an FDE. They're going to know that this is, if they get an original exemplar of this person, this questioned person that it's supposed to be, in this case, the wife, it's not going to appear the same. Let's say if her husband tried to mask her writing, it's going to look completely different, Dave.
Your wife is missing and you have 2 letters that give you everything. The kids and come on. That's where this investigation began. Now, Joe, as an investigator, you got the 2 letters. How quickly does it take for you to determine that these were not written by Sandra Pagniano?
Well, for me personally, as an investigator, I couldn't. I could look at it, even though I have had a class in question documents during the course of graduate work in forensics. I'm not the person I'm going to turn to. I'm going to go to the state crime lab. And now I can eyeball it and say, there's something that looks screwy about this, but I can't necessarily put my finger on it. And that's why we've got, in forensics, we've got so many disciplines within it, because there's somebody you can turn to. Here's a problem now that kind of exists in question document examination, though, Dave, is that there's not as many question document examiners or forensic document examiners as there once was, because what's happening to handwriting? Well, it's kind of fallen out of favor. People rely on typing things now.
Texting.
They do digital communication. So you have to be able to track down somebody that is qualified in order to do an assessment for you that's going to turn it around in a timely fashion. Let's don't forget, you've got a missing woman. You want to know what happened to her. So you have to do this with all speed. If you think that there's something weird going on at this point, this case bubbled up to the top all the way back in 2017, Dave.
Yeah.
We've gone a good deal down the road here time-wise before, anything really turns up about her. I think we're kind of past the critical mass. So you're there as an investigator left to pick up the pieces. And if somebody has been this deceptive along the way, you have to look for any kind of landmarks along the way, or landmines rather, that could essentially damn the case, before you ever really get down the road in it.
Friday. Kick off the Winter Olympics in style with the opening ceremony from Italy, featuring a special performance by Mariah Carey. Celebrate the greatest athletes from around the globe as they come together to go for gold.
Lindsey Vonn, sensational!
The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics.
Ilya Malinin.
Redefining this sport.
Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
I'll have to confess something here. I love Arizona. I've spent quite a bit of time there, but if you've never been there, particularly if you come from a greener area of the country and you plop down in Arizona, if you're not used to it and you look around, you're like, what planet am I on? Because it is such the opposite of anything that we're used to, particularly down here in the South, where everything is green. It's very lush. You get there and everything, until you get used to the environment, kind of everything looks the same until you begin to pick out details. And then there's a real beauty in it. Yeah. Some of the most beautiful sunsets and sunrises I've ever seen in my life were in Arizona. It's striking. but they were able to narrow this area down. And once you can kind of pinpoint it with the digital evidence, if you know that she's missing, you want to go out there armed with a tool. And in this particular case, they show up with canines, with cadaver dogs, essentially, to begin to search for her. We know that she hasn't gone out there and built a little cabin where she's living peacefully without her husband and her babies. There's a reason why he was out there. Why would he have a need to go out there to that specific location, approximating the time at which she went and by the way, he never gave any indication where it's not like he wanted to jump in and say, yeah, gee whiz, let me help you find my wife. We've talked about this recently, Dave. I still recall you had made this real insightful comment about it's never the people. They're not going to roll up their sleeves and say, gee whiz, I really want to find my loved one. They hang in the background. Mm-hmm. And in this case, that's what happened. But he
didn't even report her missing, Joe.
No,
he didn't even report the mother of his children missing.
No.
They're in the middle of a divorce, fighting over everything, and he's just going to not report. Hey, Joe, we all have watched TV. We know who the suspicion's going to fall on. I'm guessing maybe David Pagniano had never seen television before, or any movies, or read any books, or seen anything dealing with crime of any sort, because that's what he's acting like. But let me ask you this, Joe, because I'm very curious as to because you're around investigators, beyond just forensic stuff. You've been around police and detectives and all that for a long time. But when they start looking at something like this, do they immediately start sniffing around the husband here? I know they got to look at everything, but do they really start analyzing everything he says, everything he does, and everything he doesn't do?
Yes. And it's not just the husband, it's the wife. If it's whoever's
not missing.
Whoever's not missing. And because listen, my wife's going to know where I am.
Right.
She is. We're together 24/7, which I enjoy. I love being with my wife. She's the delight of my life. But if
y'all
I go
are
missing,
sickeningly sweet. Y'all are like like drinking grape Kool-Aid with extra sugar, drinking it using a red vine. That's what y'all are like.
I'm one of these guys that when you've had it really bad, you discover how great it is finally. And I'm like, what's your term? I'm like a hair in a biscuit. I ain't turning loose. But Kimmy's going to know where I am at any particular time. And if I've disappeared, you bet the local constabulary are going to press her very, very hard. And many times families recoil at that because they're put off by the heavy-handed nature of the police. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason they're heavy-handed. They're trying to extract information from that central point of contact. And when you see somebody like this fellow who is so disengaged relative to, like you said, his wife, and she's not his ex-wife, his wife and the mother of his babies, they're going to want answers because he's going to have the most knowledge. He's the default position in all of this. And so, they're going to look at him hard, and they're also going to look at his digital footprint nowadays. In the past, it wasn't like that, but now it's a grand tool to have. It's terrifying, but it's a grand tool to have. And then, you're going to couple that with the use of cadaver dogs. If we were having this conversation 30 years ago, people would think we were out of our minds.
Yeah.
But now this is the norm. This is the norm. This is how cases are handled.
Hey, Joe, but when you bring cadaver dogs out to an area, a remote area, can they, because it is a remote area and you are dealing with, decomposing humans smell different than decomposing cattle?
To dogs, they do.
Yeah. Okay.
I can't say that to humans.
Right.
No,
but to a dog, they know the difference.
Yeah. They're going to know the difference, and they're trained. And as a matter of fact, I have experience not training the dogs, but providing them with samples to actually use in order to train the dogs. And that meant we would have handlers that would come to the morgue particularly with bodies that were decomposing. And there's fluid that drips from those bodies that's contained in the bag or on the tray. And they would take a cloth and absorb some of that. And then they would go out and place samples of that. It was a fascinating process. And they would place samples of that all over the place so that these animals would begin in their own olfactory spectrum, is the way I like to refer to it, that they have, that is like, I don't know, 1,000 times greater than what we possess as humans.
Right.
They would fine tune that and begin to go out and begin to sniff. And that's one of the methods that they use in order to, to train these dogs. And they're very honed in. You have some dogs that have multiple hats, if you permit me to say that multiple utility. But, cadaver dogs are very, very specific. They're looking for something in decay. I'm not saying that they would not perhaps hit on a decomposing cow or a deer or another dog when they're looking for a human, but they're kind of zoned in on that human smell and that human decomposition smell.
How far away?
And we can't quantify that as humans scientifically, but they're so sensitive to it. Dogs are. They can fine tune those dogs so that they can pick up on it. I don't think that we fully understand the science behind what they do.
So if you get out of the general vicinity with a canine that is trained, a cadaver dog, and you're just out in the general vicinity, they're going to get a whiff and start honing in on it.
I think that they will. And the way a search pattern works like this is that let's use the example of the cell tower.
Right.
A cell tower covers a huge area.
Yep.
But if you can triangulate that cell tower, it's going to give you, like where you have 3 separate cell towers where that phone is pinging at a central location. You find that central location. All right. This is very oversimplified. I know that anybody that's into cyber investigation will say, God, man, tighten it down a little bit, but very broadly speaking.
You're using the number 1 pencil. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Great analogy. And so, what they will do is find that central point, and they will begin to do almost a spiral search where they start off at the most distal location from that central area and then tighten that spiral as they're going around and around and around and around to get to that central hub. And somewhere around there, what the cops are saying here, or what they're thinking, is somewhere in this area that he had no business being in, we might have remains. And as you begin to take that dog and kind of work that swirl around and around, that spiral thing, you begin to narrow it down. And sooner or later, you're going to get that dog to alert. And I would have to think that as a handler, that would have to be you would have a visceral response to that. It's like how exciting that would be, as gruesome as this is, but how exciting that would be, to have this tool that you're going to be able to provide answers to the police and to families and all these sorts of things. But Dave, I got to tell you, man, when they began to, work this dog in this area, they hit, and boy, they hit big. And the rest of the story. Oh,
Joe, I got it.
It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah. All right. So we know they find the body. They find Sandra Pagniano, and by finding her body in what they describe as a shallow hand dug grave, they find that she has been bound and gagged, or bound. Yeah, is that the right term when somebody's had tape placed over their mouth?
Yeah. Well, you can place tape over a mouth, and that's not necessarily gagging. Gagging generally involves some type of obstruction that will muffle them to the point where they're not going to be able to cry out. If somebody just merely has duct tape over their face, that can be worked out.
It'd be wet, right? Spit.
Yeah. Saliva, sweat, certainly, because you think about if you're in the throes of this, you're perspiring, you're terrified. And that's one of the things we do when we're terrified. That's going to turn loose. If you have a gag in somebody's mouth, and it can be a piece of cloth, it can be any number of things.
Okay. Well, she was bound about the mouth and head, and police said it's so she couldn't make any noise. They're saying she was kidnapped out of her own house in the middle of the night with her 12-year-old and 8-year-old asleep in the house.
Yeah,
and that
right.
she was gagged to prevent any noise. Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's what would happen. Let's just say that he crept into the space where she's sleeping, and he's got her attention. Put his hand over her mouth, stick something in her mouth to keep her muffled, so that the kids don't hear. Maybe he's threatening her life at that point in time. Mm-hmm. You say a word, I'm going to kill you. I'll kill the kids. I'll do whatever I have to do. And she's going to submit at that point in time. Right. We can only suspect this. But how else are you going to, in the presence of her children in that house, how are you going to get her to comply? Yeah. But yeah, he literally kidnapped her from this home and removed her from there. But Dave, this guy is absent. This case, Dave, this is one of the single most inhumane things that we've covered in a while, because he's absolutely positively without mercy or any level of compassion. Because Dave, he buried this poor woman alive, man.
How can they tell that, Joe? She was bound about her head and her arms and legs. I'm assuming all these things. How could they tell that she was buried alive?
Well, because this is going to be an asphyxial death. And that's really the only way that you could describe it. Now,
and there were marks inside that grave. Can they find that out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they can. And one of the ways that you're going to do it, and this is really horrific, you're going to find dirt beneath her fingernails, perhaps.
Oh, good grief.
And I'm thinking right now of J.J. Vallow, because one of the things that came out with J.J. was that, he was buried. We don't know if he was alive when he was buried, but there was apparently an effort on his part, because there were scratch marks on one side of his neck in order to get that tape off of his face. I'm wondering if that's what we're looking at here. First off, let's go back to what you mentioned a minute ago, because I was kind of interested in the statement that you made that this was a hand-dug grave. A hand-dug grave, when they're saying that, you're getting into tool mark evidence now. Let's just say you take a shovel out there, and it's a standard spade-style shovel that's kind of curved, as opposed to kind of a block shovel that's got a leading edge like a blade. Let's just say you use a spade-style shovel, where when you strike a dirt wall with this, and this dirt out there, to say that it is sand, yes, it is sand, but it is so tightly packed. It takes a lot of effort in the desert to dig in, because this stuff is super baked. We covered a case out of San Bernardino the other day, Dave, and that's on the edge of the desert. You're aware of what that dirt is like. It's like digging into concrete. So every time that spade is stuck into the ground, it's going to leave a very specific mark along the edges of that would marry up to the shape of a shovel that's pushed in there. So that's going to vary from somebody coming in with a backhoe, for instance, and using that big scoop to kind of grind out the soil and pull it away. That's why they know that this is hand dug. And it's not literally that he took his hands and dug the grave, but I'm suspecting that there's significant tool marks that have been left behind, and that's evidenced in this case. But it's shallow, Dave. It's kind of shallow. There's only so far that you could go. And you've got this woman that is bound. Her breathing is greatly compromised because of this gag tape over her mouth. And if her hands are bound, when we breathing just doesn't involve the nose and the mouth. Many times we can be compromised in our ability to breathe if we're bound. You don't think about how everything is connected and how you move around, and you can get comfortable and you can take a deep breath and that sort of thing. So she's even further compromised by being bound. Now, if she finally gets loose, she still can't get up out of the dirt, depending upon how tightly packed it is. We don't know if maybe he stood over the grave after he patted the thing down with her in it. The medical examiner actually believes, Dave, that she could have lived for as long as 5 minutes after being buried in this space. And this is
she's
not
been
like
kidnapped out of her house. She's had her face and head, her mouth is gagged. She's been bound by her hands and feet. She's struggling to try to get out, moving her body any which way she can, struggling and 5 minutes of horror trying to get out to get back to her children. Because you know what she knows on top of everything else? She knows that her 8-year-old and her 12-year-old girls are at home alone. There's nobody there because her husband has her out in the desert.
Yep.
There's nobody at that house if something happens. That's a mother. That's what she's thinking. She's not thinking, I'm going to die here. She's thinking, I got to get back to my kids.
I got to get back. I got to, because if this is happening to me, I really want folks to hear this. If this is happening to me and I'm being put through this, what other horror, torture lies ahead for my babies, these young girls that I've raised to almost, one on the verge of becoming a teenager, another one 8. I mean, I remember what it was like to be 8 and how dependent I was upon my mother being around, my grandmother being around. And that thought, that's even more torturous, isn't it, Dave? You know, when you begin to consider that. And so you couple that, we know that she's just struck by anxiety at this point in time. She's shallow breathing. She's sweating profusely. She's struggling to get free, and she can't. And the problem with this kind of compression / positional asphyxia that she would have encountered is that the more she struggles, the worse it gets, because now you're in a deprived state relative to oxygen. And we actually refer to this as oxygen deprivation. And this is what I'm very curious about, is that if she was able to work out this gag in some way, or get past the tape that is covering her face, Dave, did she inhalate any of the dirt? And that's one of the things that we would see in the airway. It's like a fire. You know, if we have somebody that is alive during the course of a fire, they inhalate soot, right? Same thing applies with dirt. If it gets into your mouth and you're trying to uptake, and this dirt is loose, remember, because he's hand dug the grave. All right. Now he might have packed down the top, but this loose dirt is around her, and it's literally coming in to her nose. And let's just say her mouth, look at it this way. Her mouth is bound or covered. Is her nose also covered? Because if her nose is not covered, guess what?
Oh, my word.
When you inhalate that, it's going into your airway. And the more that goes into your airway, the more compromised you are in your ability to uptake oxygen. It is hands down, I think, one of the most torturous ways that any one human being could die. You think about, why are you incapable of extending mercy? But in his case, I think he may have had, David Pagniano may have had for a moment, an epiphany, because he realized there was no way out of this. He wound up pleading guilty to the murder of his wife. And in addition to that, kidnapping, forgery, and fraud. He's now in the Arizona State Penitentiary for the rest of his life. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.